he's just not very serious about how he thinks about some of these issues. And one must be serious.
Why does she talk like a Dickens novel sometimes? This happens a lot. Kamala Harris last night, MSNBC. If we watch a little bit of this, you're going to realize why she hasn't given any interviews up until this point. Here we go.
Some of the work is going to be through what we do in terms of giving benefits and assistance to state and local governments around transit dollars, and looking holistically at the connection between that and housing, and looking holistically at the incentives we in the federal government can create for local and state governments to actually engage in planning in a holistic manner that includes prioritizing affordable housing for working people.
If you're keeping score at home, that's 3 times she said the word holistic or holistically in 25 seconds. That's, I think, a new world record. If I'm Stephanie Ruhle at this point, if I'm Larry O'Connor sitting in Stephanie Ruhle's chair, because if I'm Stephanie Ruhle, I'm not doing anything because my job is to shut my mouth and just be a propagandist. But if I'm sitting in the chair across from her and she does that to me, I lean forward and say, oh, I take your point. Thank you. Hey, real fast for some of our viewers, could you define holistic, please? Could you please just define that word? Because who here thinks she can do that? Who here thinks Kamala Harris actually understands what holistic means? But we're smart enough to know what holistic means and taking a holistic approach and how things are done holistically. So in case you missed it, her use of this word is actually kind of terrifying if she even knows what she's talking about. Let's break this down one more time so you know what she's actually saying she's going to do as president of the United States.
Some of the work is going to be through what we do in terms of giving benefits and assistance to state and local governments around transit dollars, and looking holistically at the connection between that and housing.
Okay, now, right there, you heard her. This has to do with transit dollars, money funneled through the Department of Transportation to local jurisdictions. But tied to that money will be a holistic approach about how transportation money is tied to housing policies in those jurisdictions. Stay with me on this, because I know a lot of people are laughing at the fact that she kept saying holistically. And again, I don't think she knows what it means. But listen to what this top-down federal government, Washington, D.C., in charge of everything in your lives approach is that she's describing by throwing out the word holistic, okay? So transit dollars through the Department of Transportation for roads and subways and what have you, tied to the local jurisdiction's holistic approach to housing and
looking holistically at the incentives we in the federal government can create for local and state governments to actually engage in planning in a holistic manner that includes prioritizing affordable housing.
Okay, so look at what she's saying here. You know, what we're going to do is control housing policies in your local county or city by giving them incentives and federal money tied to transportation dollars, which a lot of cities and states rely on from the federal government for their highways, for their expressways. We've sadly relied on the federal government and tax dollars for things like that. So here's a city desperate for the money that they've been addicted to over the last decades, coming from Washington, D.C. But with Kamala Harris, Comrade Kamala in charge, she's not going to give you that money that you need to repair your roads or other mass transit priorities unless you tie it to affordable housing and housing policies, which has absolutely nothing to do with the transportation dollars that you need for your roads and your highways. But Comrade Kamala in charge of the top-down central planning Marxist approach to how she's going to govern, you're not going to give a thin dime. You're not going to get a thin dime from Washington, D.C. unless you salute smartly at what this woman wants you to do for housing. And by the way, what's her model for good housing policies and affordable housing policies? California. Specifically San Francisco. Last I checked, they've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people living on the streets in tents and cardboard boxes, thanks to their holistic approach to affordable housing. Do you see what we're getting at here? Yeah, sure, she used the word holistic, but what she's really describing is central planning. Central planning in the Marxist model from Washington, D.C., they'll take tax dollars from Boise, Idaho, or Norman, Oklahoma. They'll give it to Chicago to fix their subway system, but only if it's tied to their affordable housing plans in the inner city. That's central planning. That's Marxism. And it's dressed up with the word holistic. Yes, it's fun to make fun of her using the word holistic, and I assure you, she doesn't know what that means. But it's actually terrifying if you break down what she said just now, which most analysts I've seen haven't actually done that. But we actually don't take Kamala Harris seriously here, but we take her words and her policies seriously because, you see, we see what happens when the puppet is put in the Oval Office and the maniacal Marxists who run the puppet actually screw up our country. And they're telling you right before your very eyes exactly how they're going to do it. All right, more clips from this interview.
The first one, just a fact check, because your opponent
There is
almost
no little
every
job.
day.
There's no such thing as a little job.
Okay, fair. Because your opponent almost every day seems to be talking about this. So I just want to ask you yes or no. At any point in your life, have you served 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun working at a McDonald's? Yes or no? That's it.
I have.
Okay. Now the other job. But
it was not a small job. Like I did the fries. I mean, yes.
Okay.
What you just witnessed was Stephanie Ruhle winning a Peabody Award for journalism, political journalism. That was, and probably another extra couple zeros on her next contract negotiation with NBC, or perhaps even a primetime show on one of the networks. That right there, that's worthy of network news, isn't it? And everyone's saying now, Trump should stop lying about whether she worked at McDonald's. Well, no. How do you know that Trump's lying versus how she's lying? I did the fries. What does that even mean? I did the fries. And I've actually done some independent journalism on this because I know some people who work at McDonald's. There are literally no instances that I've been aware of in my research where somebody is hired to just do the fries. They have rotating shifts. And if you're working behind the counter, or meaning not at the counter, but actually in food service at McDonald's, you rotate. You do work the burgers. You work the ice cream machine sometimes. You work the fries, sure, but you don't just do the fries. I think she's still lying. And McDonald's has no record of her ever working for the company. Maybe it was a franchise that used different rules. Or maybe it was a knockoff McDonald's, like the one in Eddie Murphy's Coming to America. It's possible. It's certainly possible. But good job, Stephanie Ruhle. NBC News is proud as a peacock to have you there.
Tariffs aren't unique to President Trump. President Biden has tariffs in place. He's actually looking to potentially implement more. Where do you come out on? Is there a good tariff, a bad tariff?
Well, part of it is you don't just throw around the idea of just tariffs across the board. And that's part of the problem with Donald Trump. Frankly, and I say this in all sincerity, he's just not very serious about how he thinks about some of these issues. And one must be serious and have a plan.
One must be serious and have a plan. Why does she talk like a Dickens novel sometimes? This happens a lot with her. I've got another instance coming up, but one must be serious, she says. One must be serious, and Donald Trump isn't serious about tariffs. See, the sad thing for Kamala Harris and for Stephanie Ruhle, who is literally just being a potted plant and repeating questions without any follow-ups. But the sad thing for both of them in this is that the American people know that Donald Trump had 4 years in the White House. And yes, he did utilize tariffs, and he got criticized by some conservatives who have a distrust of tariffs. But I got to tell you, every single time Donald Trump did use tariffs in a targeted way, some on China, some on Canada, by the way, with regard to lumber in exchange for some dairy issues that were going on. Canada was undermining Wisconsin dairy farmers. And so as a retaliation against Canada, they put a tariff on lumber coming in the Pacific Northwest. And that worked itself out. But I remember when he put those tariffs on, everyone was screaming and complaining. It's like, well, this is going to make lumber go up and that's going to affect housing costs in Home Depot. Well, no, actually, as soon as the tariffs were implemented, it actually fixed the problem because Canada said, okay, let's work something out. It's actually the opposite of what Kamala Harris is accusing Donald Trump of doing. He hasn't done like a tariffs across the board kind of approach. It's very targeted to industries and it's very targeted to certain countries. So she's lying. If only there were a journalist involved in this interview, They could have called her on that and said, well, wait a minute, what specifically are you saying? Because Donald Trump has been in office for 4 years and he has no track record of doing exactly what you're saying right now. But unfortunately, this interview on MSNBC resembled the campaign event with Oprah Winfrey last week that was literally paid for by the campaign. It was an infomercial. If anything, Kamala Harris's campaign got a free infomercial from NBC, which is actually Universal Comcast. So probably they should claim this on their taxes as a campaign donation, shouldn't they? All right, let's keep going.
There are people there that are stressed, that feel that they're at capacity. Communities around the country that have legal immigration, many have said we're at capacity. And many feel like the government has said to them, well, adapt, sit down, be quiet. This is how it is. What would a Harris administration do for those communities who've taken in many, many legal immigrants, but are at capacity?
Well, first of all, we do have a broken immigration system, and it needs to be fixed. And if we take a step back, months ago, some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress came together with others, proposed a border security bill that would have put 1,500 new border agents on the border to help those hardworking border agents who are there right now working around the clock. Would have put more money into stemming the flow of fentanyl, which is killing Americans around our country and devastating communities.
All right, let me jump in here real fast. She does not need a bill from the Senate with Republicans on board or not to do something about fentanyl, okay? The only reason she's talking about this bill is that it's a distraction, which, by the way, she mentioned conservative members of the Senate. It's one conservative member, James Lankford of Oklahoma, who should be publicly ridiculed and shamed until he pays penance for even participating in this ridiculous bill that was dead on arrival and never even made it to a floor vote or a committee vote for that matter. That the only reason she's pointing to this bill in the Senate is, number one, it's a distraction, and number two, it's a way for her to try to blame Donald Trump, which he's about to do. But understand something. Even if that bill had been passed into law, it doesn't erase the 3 years leading up to that bill where she and Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas and every other Democrat in this country lied to the American people saying the border was secure and that there was no border crisis and fentanyl wasn't a problem. So if you really needed this bill that made its way out of negotiations January of this past year, what the hell were you doing the first 3 years? Okay, that's the first point. The second point, though, and the very important one, is when she raises fentanyl. Oh, if only we had that bill passed, then we could do something about fentanyl, which is killing Americans right now. Honey, if you believe the fentanyl is killing Americans right now, which it is, and it's tied to a border security problem, there is literally nothing stopping you and that empty husk of a human being sitting in the Oval Office right now, Joe Biden, from actually doing something about it. Think about what she's communicating here. Fentanyl is killing Americans because of the lack of border security, but I can't do anything about it because I need to have a huge negotiated bill come out of the Senate that gives Democrats amnesty and other goodies that we demand. Otherwise, I'm not doing anything about fentanyl. That's what she's basically saying right here. And again, this would be a great time for Stephanie Ruhle to lean in and say, wait, if fentanyl's a problem, why do you need this bill coming out of the Senate in some sort of bipartisan agreement? If you just did one standalone bill about fentanyl, I'm sure Republicans would join in. The problem is you added a ton of other crap that nobody's going to approve of. So she's lying, she's lying, she's lying. And believe it or not, she's lying. Let's not also forget that the question here from Stephanie Ruhle, which I got to give her credit for, is somewhat coherent and fair. She's basically talking about Springfield, Ohio. She said in the question, there are communities who have been inundated with illegal immigrants that have been airdropped into their communities. They've got tons of legal immigrants there. She said legal immigrants, which technically is Springfield, Ohio, with the Haitians, because the Haitians have legal temporary protective status, but that's not legal immigration. It's people coming here illegally and then granted temporary status. But set that aside for a moment. She said those communities are feeling the pressure. They feel like they've done enough and they need relief. What can you do for them? And all this woman can do is say, well, Republicans screwed us on this bill because Trump tried to undermine it, which is a total lie, by the way. So she's already distracting and not even answering the question, which is Americans are hurting. What will you do to help them? Which, by the way, if you're running for president, is the softest of all softballs that you should be able to hit out of the park. But she can't do it because she has no grounded values or principles on the immigration issue. She only knows how to use the immigration issue as a political weapon. but she doesn't know what she believes about immigration, except that she wants as many people coming into the country illegally so she can grant them amnesty, get them citizenship, so they will all vote Democrat, which is what she's about to tell you.
Would have put more resources into our ability to prosecute transnational criminal organizations, which in my career I've prosecuted. Donald Trump got word of the bill, realized it was going to fix a problem he wanted to run on, and told him to kill the bill, don't put it up for a vote. He killed a bill that would have actually been a solution because he wants to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And that's part of what needs to be addressed. And my pledge is that when elected president, if the American people will have me, I will bring that bill back and I will sign it into law. And
all right. So again, the question is, what are you going to do to the communities who are hurting right now? And that bill has nothing to do with those communities, nothing at all to do with those communities. We're talking about the 10+ million people who are already here that have gotten here in the last 3.5 years under your control, under your negligence. And her solution is, I'm going to bring up a bill that has already been defeated and didn't even make its way to the floor of the Senate, where Democrats have the majority. I'm going to demand that that bill be brought up again, knowing that as of now, Republicans will have the majority in the Senate, and there's no way in high hell that they're going to bring it up. So in other words, she has no solution. She's accusing Donald Trump of using immigration as a political weapon, and he didn't want the bill passed because he wanted something to run on, where she is literally using that bill in that exact same way. She is using the bill that is dead on arrival and is never going anywhere as a political weapon because she wants something to run on, because it's the only thing she can say about immigration. She has a horrible record. Her administration has a horrible record. You know how I know she has a horrible record on immigration? Because someone who has a good record on immigration, asked that same question from Stephanie Ruhle, would say, well, let me first by telling you all of the things we've done that have worked and have been effective. But she didn't do that. The very first thing she said was, well, Donald Trump killed a bill that would have solved this problem, which, by the way, is a concession that there is a problem. And of course, everybody knows that the problem was caused by her and her boss, Joe Biden, reversing all of Trump's policies on day one, which of course would have been also a very good follow-up question from Stephanie Ruhle, saying, wait a second, why do you need that bill? You guys reversed everything Donald Trump had put in place on day one, and that's when everything blew up. So why not just go back and put things in place, which is kind of what Joe Biden did in May, by the way. He put back a couple of the provisions through executive orders right before, the election season came around. She has nothing, but she's going to continue lying, except for one little element of truth that she delivers here. There is one little nugget of truth that you should pay attention to. Here it comes.
And we need a comprehensive plan that includes what we need to do to fortify not only our border, but deal with the fact that we also need to create pathways for people to earn citizenship.
There it is. That's the nugget of truth. And it's the only thing you need to know about her immigration plan. Pathway to citizenship. Pathway to citizenship for whom? Pathway to citizenship for anyone in this country illegally who doesn't have citizenship, or for that matter, legal status. They don't even have green cards. They've cut through the lines. All the people who are actually following the law and trying to immigrate to this country legally, they get screwed. The people who broke the law and came here illegally and became an immediate drain on our country's resources, they get amnesty and a pathway to citizenship. That's her plan. Think about it. It's so maniacal. You get into office, you reverse all of the border security programs that Donald Trump put in place. You basically have a free-for-all at the border. You get over 10 million people enter this country in just 3.5 years. And then you say, make me president and I'll give them all citizenship. And by the way, where are they all living? They're living in Texas, Arizona, Florida, and they've been airlifted to places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Virginia. And now all those millions of people who are brought here illegally and then moved around the country into red or battleground states, suddenly they'll get citizenship and they'll be able to vote. And then what will the electoral makeup be in this country after that happens? That's the truth of her immigration plan. And I'm shocked actually that she let it out there. I'm shocked that she accidentally told the truth for 3 seconds in this interview. Unbelievable.
Madam Vice President, you just laid out your economic vision for the future.
Yeah.
But still, there are lots of Americans who don't see themselves in your plans. For those who say these policies aren't for me, what do you say to them?
Well, if you are hardworking, if you have the dreams and the ambitions and the aspirations of what I believe you do, you're in my plan. You know, I have to tell you, I really love and am so energized by what I know to be the spirit and character of the American people. We have ambition. We have aspirations. We have dreams. We can see what's possible. We have an incredible work ethic. But not everyone has the access to the opportunities that allow them to achieve those things. But we don't lack for those things. But not everyone, you know, gets handed stuff on a silver platter. And so my vision for the economy, I call it an opportunity economy, is about making sure that all Americans, wherever they start, wherever they are, have the ability to actually achieve those dreams and those ambitions, which include, for middle-class families, just being able to know that their hard work allows them to get ahead, right? I think we can't and we shouldn't aspire to have an economy that just allows people to get by. People want to do more than just get by. They want to get ahead. And I come from the middle class.
Of course she comes. I love that she had to add the "I come from the middle class" at the end there. Did you follow that answer by any chance? Again, this was a softball served up by Stephanie Ruhle. Listen to the question again, because I know that you've completely drifted off and you're now putting together your grocery list for after work later today and the things that you need to pick up before the kids are home from school. Listen to the question again before that rambling incoherence word salad hit us in the face.
Madam Vice President, you just laid out your economic vision for the future.
Yeah.
But still, there are lots of Americans who don't see themselves in your plans. For those who say these policies aren't for me, what do you say to them?
Again, a softball right over the plate. Any politician, any elected official worth their salt with just the basic level of skills should be able to answer that and have it be coherent. And she couldn't. And if I may quote the magnum opus of Adam Sandler, the Billy Madison film.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Earlier on MSNBC, before the full interview aired, Stephanie Ruhle did a whole, media blitz trying to promote this thing. And they grabbed a clip that they thought was going to really show the best part of the interview. And she showed up on what's her name? Nicole Wallace. Thank you, God. On Nicole Wallace's show. We'll watch this clip first, and then there's something great about it that I want you to see as well. We'll watch it a second time. But here's the moment where they pull a really, really good clip out from the interview.
Talk about that answer. I do, but here's what's a little tricky. She doesn't answer the question around if the GOP is controlling the Senate, if she can't raise corporate taxes, where is she going to get the money from? To expand the child tax credit and do all the things she wants to do. And she says, we just have to do it. And that's great, and that's a campaign promise. But the issue is, if it means we're just going to borrow again, then what we're doing is we're just never addressing the deficit. And back in the days when you were a proud Republican, debts and deficits mattered.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a clip that they played first, and then this. But I love it. It's like, well, here it's tricky to give you my analysis of this because she just didn't answer the question. We're going to play it one more time, but this time I want you to keep your eyes on Nicole Wallace. Okay, watch her face as this answer comes through.
Talk about that answer. I do, but here's what's a little tricky. She doesn't answer the question around if the GOP is controlling the Senate, if she can't raise corporate taxes, where is she going to get the money from?
Did you see what I saw? Was that not just classic? Look at, it's like the meme, right? Look at the smile on her face. And then the answer, well, she didn't really answer the question. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to, oh, it's so bad. They can tell, they know. Look at Nicole Wallace's face. It took just 6 seconds for her to go from beaming smiles. We got Kamala, and we're going to win this thing to, oh, crap. The first thing Stephanie Ruhle says on my show in primetime is that Kamala Harris didn't answer a question. And she didn't. She didn't answer hardly any of the questions. Now, by the time the interview actually aired and Stephanie Ruhle continued to do the post-interview, I mean, honestly, they didn't have any regular programming on MSNBC. It was the pre-interview, then the interview, and then the post-interview. It's like they had the Super Bowl last night. And on Chris Hayes's show, they tried to sort of fix her analysis, right? They pulled her aside and they said, listen, Stephanie, we're glad you got the get and you gave her exactly the propaganda she was hoping for. Good on you, because we got to win this election. But, you know, that whole she didn't answer the question thing with Nicole earlier today, that left a bad taste in our mouth. Is there any way you can sort of soften your analysis with Chris Hayes? And Stephanie's like, you betcha, you got it. Ask me about the tariffs question and I'll cover it for you. So let's see how she fixed the problem.
Work. And one could watch that and say, well, she didn't give a clear, direct answer. That's okay, because we are not talking about clear or direct issues.
The question about...
Did you catch that in that crack analysis by the interviewer, the real tough, hard-hitting, future Peabody Award-winning and future primetime star Stephanie Ruhle's analysis of Kamala Harris, the woman who wants to be president, of her non-answer to her question about tariffs?
And one could watch that and say, well, she didn't give a clear, direct answer. That's okay, because we are not talking about clear or direct issues.
She didn't give me a clear or direct answer to my question. And not only is that okay, it's preferable. That's what we want. That was a trick question. See, Trump would have given me a clear and direct answer. And that's right there is a disqualifier. That proves that Trump shouldn't be president, but she was smart enough to evade my question. Good for her. We don't deserve a president like Kamala Harris. She's too good for us. This is where we are now. Scott Jennings, CNN, gave, well, what we've grown accustomed to. Fantastic analysis.
Yeah, I'm still confused about which billionaire rich people are good and which are bad. Trump is, I guess, bad. The people who support Trump are bad. The billionaires that she goes around with, I guess, are good. I think it's a very muddled thing, and I still don't understand. I think today was a miss for Harris. I mean, Joe Biden went on The View today and said he delegated all sorts of authority to her on domestic policy. We know that the Biden administration is not popular on domestic and economic policy. She gave a speech today saying we've got to move past the policies that people think have failed. Well, people think the last 4 years are a failure. And from what I can tell from this interview tonight, which was really a home game. I mean, going on with this particular interviewer, it was like effectively interviewing with her campaign's press secretary. She had nothing new to say on the economy beyond this ridiculous pablum. You want to talk about aspirations and dreams? They're crushed in this country because of inflation, and these kinds of interviews and the day that she had today are not going to solve it.
So, Jane.
Yeah, well done there. And he brings us to Joe Biden. Really, it is sort of the most important thing that happened before this interview is what happened about 8 hours in front of it. And that was Joe Biden showing up on The View. Kamala Harris spent this entire primetime interview with Stephanie Ruhle running against the administration she's a part of, saying that we need a new opportunity economy. I mean, what's stopping her from going into the Oval Office right now saying, Mr. President, people are hurting out there. Let's start my opportunity economy today. Nothing's stopping her from doing that. But she's trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes in some way and running against the Biden administration. She says that the more and more people realize that the American dream is out of reach for them. For God's sake, the Democrats have had control of the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. If people feel like the American dream is out of reach, who the hell do you think is responsible for that? And yet she continues to act like she's got the solutions, and if you elect her, she'll be able to put them in place, which makes you wonder, why isn't she doing it right now? And Joe Biden, just 8 hours before this interview aired, he undermined the entire message with this.
And as vice president, there wasn't a single thing that I did that she couldn't do. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to delegate her responsibility on everything from foreign policy to domestic policy.
There you go. He delegated foreign policy and domestic policy. And guys, how's the foreign policy and domestic policy working out for you right now? You know, if you go to the Kamala Harris for President website and read about all the problems in this country, you would think that she's not very happy with our current foreign and domestic policy, even though the president just said he delegated responsibilities to her for both of those things. I mean, I didn't expect it to be that bad, but it was worse than bad for her. I'm pretty sure this will be the last interview she does. And again, it was served up on a silver platter for her, and she just couldn't do it. She made matters worse at a time where she needs a lift. That's why they agreed to do this, right? They would not have done this interview unless they knew they needed something because things are starting to slip away. She's trying to play out the clock. She's playing a prevent defense right now. She thinks she has a lead and it's the final seconds, but actually, we're talking about 6 weeks right now. This is like maybe the end of the second quarter. Yeah, it's going to move fast right now, but this is no time for prevent defense. This is no time for trying to just, let's hold on to our lead and just play out the clock. No. That's not politics anymore, not in our day and age. She needed a grand slam last night, and she grounded out to shortstop. Actually, she struck out swinging. It was ugly.